Hey everybody, welcome back to Beyond Profit, a Global Perspective, and I'm continuing my series of videos about how to give good quality presentations. Now hopefully that's going to be helpful for my students, but I also hope that some of the rest of you who are really interested in doing good presentations, whether it's for academics or professional presentations, I hope that some of these tips are going to help you out. Now my subject for today is talking about nonverbal communication. It's often said it's not necessarily what we say, but how we say it. And a huge percentage of our communication doesn't have to do with the content itself or the words itself, the organization. It's the way in which we deliver it. It's what does our body say about how we feel or do we care and so on. So really what I want to do is break down different forms of body language and nonverbal communication and talk about best practices and practices that aren't so good, things you want to try to avoid, and how to be extremely effective as a speaker. As usual, if you find that these videos are helpful to you, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, leave some comments down below. Maybe there are some questions you have about some of my videos, or maybe there's things I'm just not talking about and it would be helpful if I did. Look, I can answer in the lines down below, or I can make more videos if you like. So the other thing I was going to say is that if you do enjoy this kind of instruction, you can come and study with me here at the University of St. Mary. There's also lots of other professors here who do a really good job. But anyway, I want to continue our conversation now about nonverbal communication. And so let's go to it. What makes an impression? How you speak, your words, and your body language. And I do think there's been some studies on that suggest that you communicate more and better through your body language than you do through your words, through what you say, even your tone of voice. And so it's kind of an important thing when it comes to emotional intelligence. You can read other people by reading their body language, and you can also communicate with other people by using your body language. So that's what we're going to talk about here. So I will say, I'm going to give you some rules on body language. For every rule, there's an exception, so you don't have to take everything that I say absolutely literally, but keep these in mind as guidelines, as good suggestions, best practices. Make eye contact. Like I said, eyes are crucial to the whole thing. Don't ever follow that stupid rule that somebody said. It's like, oh, just look over the head of the audience and they won't know the difference. Like, if I were to talk to you guys like this the whole time, I don't know. I don't think that would work. There are lots of things that I could talk about in terms of good and bad body language. I can't cover everything, but I do want to point out a few things regarding posture. I want you to look at these two pictures and tell me what is being communicated in this dude's posture. Right, so there's lots of ways I suppose you could interpret this. I do think that this is a more open position, but it also tends to be sort of a more intimidating, generally speaking. Like, this is usually the position of the coach saying, okay, all right, we got to fix things, we got to figure things out, right? Sort of a command and control sort of position. Establishes dominance, communicates there are issues. This one sort of implies maybe don't draw near, keeps people at bay. A lot of times you have these closed positions, right? And that implies to most people that you're a closed person, or you're not an approachable person, or whatever. You have something to hide. And so when you are doing public speaking, right, then you're doing this, and you're about to tell people how it is, right? Normally speaking, like when you're doing public speaking, you really shouldn't be doing this, and you shouldn't be doing this, right? You need to keep your arms loose, and just get excited. Use your arm gestures, use your hand gestures. I've been talking a lot about hand gestures, and so maybe it's worth asking the question, how much is too much, and what do I do with my hands anyway, right? One thing you're not supposed to do is put your hands in your pockets, because that's more of a closed position too, just like this or this. But I do think, casually doing that from time to time is not a horrible thing. Well, at the one extreme, you have people sometimes who keep their hands firmly at their sides, and then the hand gestures look something like this, which are, non-committal or maybe I'm a fish or a bird that's trying to fly with very, very small wings, right? But it doesn't look very natural when all you're doing is this sort of really, really small stuff, you know? On the other hand, you can have like really big hand gestures and awkward hand gestures, right? And clearly that's too much. The other thing to think about when it comes to hand gestures also is what kind of environment are you in, right? So let's say we're having a personal conversation and I'm kind of up this close to you. You know, it doesn't make sense for me to use really big and large hand gestures. You know, it's going to be more casual. The larger the venue, the larger the hand gestures have to be. So if you look, say, at presidential candidates, public officials, people who are speaking in front of huge audiences, a lot of times their arm gestures are quite expansive because they're really small compared to their audience, and it helps them reach people more. You know, in this sort of in-between state where I'm in a classroom or maybe talking to you in a video, I can move my hands pretty freely with some level of enthusiasm without making it seem perhaps too much or too weird. So it really is kind of a relative thing about, you know, how much you use your hands and you know, when to use them and so on. And I also think to some extent it kind of depends on your personal style. You know, different things may work for different people, but it is definitely worth working on that and then being aware of how much is too much. So let's have a look at this. Now, this is not a natural posture for me, but I've seen this sometimes when people are presenting. So feet together like this. This maybe seems good. It's a little bit unnatural perhaps, although I've seen many women sort of stand with their legs together like this. Not a problem in general. However, if it leads to, let's say that somebody's got a set of cards like this, to shifting like this, then it gives the perception, well, I don't know, what do you think the perception is, right? To me, when I'm seeing posture like this, it's saying to me that maybe I don't care, maybe I'm not trying, maybe I'm not interested, right? Especially kind of you notice I do this sort of head tilt. Another thing I've seen sometimes is sort of a cross-leg maneuver. It happens sometimes when people are really nervous, so they'll stand there and present with their legs crossed like this, or sometimes, you know, as they're reading, they'll kind of like cross their leg again. Sometimes it appears to be something that's perhaps overly casual, but sometimes it's also something that's perceived as some sort of a nervous kind of an extension of, oh my gosh, I'm really nervous about what I'm doing. And there's other ways that sometimes we see insecure postures as well. Sometimes shifting weight with the knees. Again, these aren't things that people mean to do, but they're subconscious ways that people often portray nervousness or lack of confidence. And so one way to try to get past that is to try to make sure that your feet are pretty close to below your shoulders. If you do that, it's very hard, without making it look like you're dancing, it's very hard to sort of give off that kind of posture which communicates a sort of insecurity. Relaxing your position and opening it up a little bit makes you look a lot more confident. What you do with your body, you know, communicates just as much or more than the words do. And so you think about where you're moving your body when you're doing a presentation. Some of the stuff that I do, obviously, like I'm not planning out all of my movements when I'm talking to all of you, but also I've been doing this, you know, I've been doing it competitively since I was in high school, right? So, you know, the stuff, I've had years and years and years of practice, and so it's kind of internalized now. But this is a good way to learn how to be natural about your movements, is to plan them to start with. If you feel like you need to shift weight, like I said, you know, moving forward a little bit, you know, you can walk forward some, you know, you walk a little bit to the side. Now don't do this, right? Caged animal, right? You know, and I've seen people do this before too. I've seen men do this. This is like, I'm exaggerating, but it's sort of like, little exaggeration, but I've seen that. And by the way, a body break works something like this. Like, let's say I'm doing my introduction, I've just given my central purpose statement, and I'm like saying, okay, so let me tell you the first reason why you should believe what I have to say, right? So my body is coordinated with my first point. And then I'm gonna stand over here and talk for a little while. And then when I get to my second point, then I'm gonna walk over here. And so it's a choreography where you're kind of doing a dance where your body is lining up with the structure of your presentation. After successfully executing body breaks throughout your presentation to emphasize the main points, at the very end, you may want to use a slow walk forward strategy, which is sometimes associated with an emotional appeal. So maybe you slowly walk forward in order to make your final point. I've also seen some really bad podium presentations as well. So I've seen some people like hug the podium, like being really nervous about it, right? I've seen some people present, shake the podium, right? Lean on the podium, talk to people like this. Now, keep in mind, the podium is here for the purpose of you setting your notes on. But a problem is, though, is that now that I have this physical thing in front of me, it prevents the display of my body language more fully, and it creates kind of an artificial barrier between me and my audience. And so whenever I want to speak, it's best if I don't have a podium at all. Like if I've got a PowerPoint that I don't have to stare at, and I can kind of work my way through and make eye contact with the audience, that's the best possible scenario. But sometimes a podium's not a bad thing to have, right? If I have it off to the side like this, and see, I can keep my stuff here, but then I can still talk to you without using it as an absolute crutch. Another thing I want to say about podiums as well is that podiums are sometimes seen as symbols of authority. So if you're going into a room full of people who maybe aren't so sure about your credentials and you want to reinforce them and you want to sort of assume a position of power, standing behind a podium is a position of power. But keep in mind, though, that you do have still this obstacle in front of you. And so you have to overcome that through different ways. In cases of a large audience, you may want very expansive hand gestures to offset the fact that you're sort of boxed in here a little bit. You want to do an even better job with eye contact. You have to maintain that positive hand gestures, the constructive hand gestures that illustrate enthusiasm. And as I've said many times before, enthusiasm is sort of the key to the whole game. So this is a potential obstacle, but you can't think of it as something to lean on, as a crutch. You have to think about it as a tool, or maybe even something that you have to overcome if you're standing behind it. Just like podiums are potential problems and that they create distance between you and your audience, when you're asked to give a presentation from a seating position, it's the same sort of thing. Instead of a podium, now you've got this table between you. Maybe there's a whole room full of people behind tables, so there are more physical, thus more psychological obstacles. So how do you handle a situation like that? Well, first of all, I would say you need to look good. You need to look like you've got your act together. If you're wearing a jacket, just a little tip, learn from newscasters. Sit on your jacket so it doesn't bunch up at the top, right? But you also want it loose enough maybe that in case you want to use your arm gestures, your hand gestures, you definitely can. I would also say just the key is making sure that you have the same level of enthusiasm when you're sitting as opposed to when you're standing, because you do have more obstacles to overcome. There are also some posture issues that I think are definitely worth mentioning, right? So when you're giving a presentation, you don't want to seem overly casual. When you're sitting here like this, then it kind of seems like you don't really care. It might even bring down the quality of your voice. Now, that's not to say you should never necessarily do that. Like if you really are in a meeting and you want to communicate to somebody that you really don't care, or you're really being overly casual, like, yeah, it's no big deal, right? That's fine in terms of that, if that's the way that you want to communicate. But most of the time when you're doing a pitch, when you're doing a presentation, that is not the kind of posture that you want. On the other hand, I've also seen people sort of go the opposite direction, where they're kind of hugging the table because, I don't know, maybe they're trying to reach people more, or maybe they're nervous and they're grabbing onto things, right? Usually your best spot is to find a nice place where your shoulders are back and you feel you're looking very confident. Your posture is really good. I would also tend to keep your hands above the table while you're presenting. It allows you to move your hands in a more natural way. If you keep them down below, then it tends to put you in a more closed posture, which, as we've mentioned before, is not the most conducive way to communicate. So I'm going to give you a secret to giving good presentations that is maybe more important than anything else I've said so far. More important than the content, or the organization, the body language, eye contact, you name it. The most important thing to me is that you care about what you were saying, or at least you pretend to care about what you were saying. because it's that confidence and that passion that comes through confidence that really is going to allow everything else to come into place. If you go in and you don't really care, you don't act like you care, then that means that your gestures are going to be kind of weak anyway, and your face won't really reflect the passion that you have, and your voice won't reflect that. You're much more likely to have audible pauses if you're not really in the zone. And so that's the thing really I think you need to work on more than anything, is just trying to find a passion for that, because that passion is not only going to allow everything else to fall into place, it also is going to be the factor that's going to sell your idea to whoever it is that you need to talk to, right? Without that, if you don't care, why should they care? And the more you care, the more likely it is that you're going to get the other person to care. So that's all I have to say for now as far as nonverbal communication goes. Obviously, if you do have questions, please leave them in the comments below or ask me to make more videos. I'd be happy to talk to more about it. There's plenty to say about nonverbal communication, way beyond even what this video has to offer. So feel free to do your own research, or like I said, let me know if there's any other ways that I can help. Best of luck to you on your presentations, and we'll see you next time.